Hi, good morning and welcome. My name's Filipović-Carter, and I'll be chairing the session today. I'm Director of Education Training Limited, which is a company that provides bespoke international training and facilitation, both online and face-to-face, to researchers at all levels, across all disciplines and sectors in the UK and elsewhere in the world. I'm also an Associate Lecturer at the Open University. Linda Hantrais and I, and Linda's our presenter this morning, we're very grateful to the Regional Studies Association and especially to Sally Hardy, their brilliant and long-standing CEO, for giving us this opportunity to contribute to their professional development webinar series. As you may know, the Regional Studies Association is the global interdisciplinary network for urban and regional research, development and policy. The RSA supports its members with the latest research, funding schemes, networking and publishing opportunities, and spaces to grow research and research careers. Let me introduce Linda to you a little. She and I have worked together for over 20 years, along with various of her academic colleagues, designing and delivering methods training programs for researchers and practitioners in the UK and Europe at different stages in their careers. Even before we began running workshops together, Linda had been chairing the cross-national research group, which organised many seminars and publications, looking at methodological issues raised in the real-life international research environment. As a Professor of European Social Policy at Loughborough University, and more recently in a number of visiting positions at the LSE, Linda has long had a focus in her research and publications on research methods and training provision for collaboration in international settings. One project that Linda and I, together with Julia Brannan, worked on was a series of workshops on international social research methods training funded by the UK's Economic and Social Research Council under their Research and Development Initiative. The project involved a series of international workshops and the production of a web learning resource based on real-life case studies, which Linda will be referring to in her presentation. In 2011, Linda established the International Advisory Group within the UK Academy of Social Sciences, many of whose members contributed to her most recent edited book on how to manage international multidisciplinary research projects, which is our topic for today. You'll note that other RSA webinars in this and previous series cover the many stages in research project management, from applications for funding, team building, research design and methods, to engagement with diverse stakeholders, international and external communications and dissemination. Our focus today is the effective management of projects involving team members collaborating not only across different cultural and linguistic borders, but also across disciplinary boundaries. Today's webinar should be seen as a taster, both for the book and for dedicated training events. The slides, including online links to all the resource materials, will be made available on request after the webinar. In line with that, and in line with a bit of housekeeping, this webinar will be recorded and will be made available on the RSA Lounge and also on the Elgar companion webpage to the book that Linda's going to focus on. Linda's presentation will last a little under 15 minutes. During the presentation, we do invite you to put your questions into the Q&A box. That's slightly different to the chat box. It's the Q&A box. So don't need to wait until the end. Pop the questions in as soon as they pop into your mind. It would be really helpful if, along with your question, you could give us your name, the country you're based in, and maybe your academic discipline, also possibly the stage you're at in your career, just so that we can make sure our answers are directly relevant to you. Also, while things are going on, if you feel inspired to, please use the hashtag RSA webinar to tweet, or should I say X, I'm not sure what the terminology is these days, about this event. I'll now ask Alex to start the presentation for us.
Okay, so the title of this RSA Professional Development webinar is taken from the Elgar Guide. The guide was first published in August 22 and is now available in hardback, paperback with a discount code, and as an ebook. The Elgar webpage, which you're looking at, contains links to the prelims, contents, and index. The book chapters 1 to 3 are open access. And then the online resources include a companion web page with video clips recorded by participants in the book's 10 case studies, describing what they learned from the experience of being associated with projects. So I want to start by explaining why we published the how-to guide and why we're relaunching it now, who the target readers and users are in size 3, 4, and 5. I address the questions, what are the main challenges facing project managers and how can these challenges be met? And more specifically, how can funders' requirements be satisfied? In conclusion, I highlight some of the most frequently recurring hot tips based on lessons learned from hands-on experience of contributors to the guide and to other training materials. I concluded in an earlier book on international comparative research theory, methods and practice that the divide between natural and social and human sciences may occasionally be bridged when the reasons for taking account of the socio-cultural impacts of phenomena become compelling, as exemplified by research into global issues. Since that book was published in 2009, 7 global societal challenges demanding international multidisciplinary collaboration were identified in the EU's 2014 Horizon 22 program, and another 17 areas of concern were targeted in the UN's Sustainable Development Goals adopted in 2015. The cumulative impacts of the Brexit referendum in 2016 and pandemic in 2022 were being felt when I agreed to edit an Elgar how-to guide on managing scientific collaborations that cross national boundaries and bridge disciplinary divides. 12 months after publication of the guide, the war in Ukraine and the global energy and associated cost of living crises have driven governments everywhere to ensure that spending on research and innovation offers value for money and produces impact. The EU's Research and Innovation Programme for 21-27, Horizon Europe, has strengthened the focus on a green, healthy, digital and inclusive Europe in a context of intense industrial competitiveness. Chapter 1 in the Elgar Guide tracks the development of complex international collaborative research and pathways to multidisciplinarity with particular reference to multinational and interdisciplinary collaborations. And all these developments have intensified the need now for a guide targeting researchers involved in managing international and multidisciplinary projects. The primary target users of the book are mid-career academic and non-academic researchers from all disciplines and cultures. We've long been aware that research methods training for postgraduates, especially those outside the UK, often overlooks international and multidisciplinary dimensions. We're also aware of the relevance of the book for more established researchers preparing to manage international multidisciplinary projects at key milestones in their careers. For the Elgar Guide, we asked the case study project leaders to explain their rationale for selecting their mix of team members. Table 2.3 illustrates the wide range of cultural and disciplinary backgrounds covered. The country base of the project coordinators and the social science disciplines are indicated in bold. Fewer than half the project coordinators are UK-based social scientists with experience in multicultural collaborative work, but more than half the authors are UK-based native speakers of English. Half of the presenters of the video clips on the Elgar companion webpage are either postgraduate researcher or postdoctoral fellows at an early stage in their careers. So managing collaborative projects is always challenging when the reason for undertaking a research project is to contribute to resolving a global and societal challenge. How to move from multinational and multidisciplinary to what is genuinely integrated international and interdisciplinary collaborations then becomes the major challenge. The greater emphasis being placed on value for money and interdisciplinary approaches in tackling global societal challenges has made it imperative for scientists at all stages in their career to know how to collaborate intensively and effectively across cultures and disciplines throughout the process. The challenge facing project coordinators varies depending on the degree of complexity of project design. Many allegedly international comparative reports and publications present parallel studies, avoiding some of the challenges of team projects. The same could be said of multidisciplinary studies, where the contributions are juxtaposed rather than being integrated or interdisciplinary. By contrast, many disciplines, particularly within the social sciences, are hybrids or chameleons. Geography, public administration, social policy are examples in the book. Their methods training equips researchers with the skills needed to work across disciplines, and many more disciplines are methodological hybrids, providing training in a mix of methods, usually including statistics and advanced information technologies. Several of the case studies involve cognate disciplines within the social sciences, broadly defined bias, EPIC, FPP, and POCU are good examples of this, but even their component disciplines may be siloized. Team members therefore need to spend time reaching a common understanding of concepts and methods. 4 of the projects depended on bridging the deep divides between the natural and social sciences. Arguably, they were facing the greatest challenges. So over the years, we've produced an abundance of publicly available resources that identify, analyze, and respond to the challenges raised in international team research. The companion website to my International Comparative Research book advised readers that in international comparative research, there's no single one best way, magic bullet, or one-size-fits-all solution to the many problems encountered. In combination with other materials, the interactive resources in the companion offer reflective and practical questions which show how the challenges of working across countries are similar, although we'd argue that multidisciplinarity adds yet another layer of complexity. The Restore archives hold online files from ESR research development and initiative training programs on international social research methods that we delivered in 2012. In preparation for the 8 methods case studies on the Restore web page, we compiled frameworks containing checklists of headings and questions for project authors, guiding them through the different stages of the research process. And we adapted these questions for contributors to the 10 case studies, the Elgar Guide, to structure their contributions so that users of the guide can track information about the different stages in the process across the chapters and by referring to the index. So from the different resources, we identified recurring questions about project funding in particular. The index terms in the Elgar Guide for Funders' Requirements direct readers to the ways in which case study authors dealt with these issues. And just briefly, they covered contractual arrangements, requirements of funders, constraints on scope of projects, policy relevance and impact, changes in the research design and methods, support staff needs, and institutional support and requirements. Table 2.2 in Chapter 2 of the Elgar book shows that the projects were funded from multiple sources: national government departments, research councils, EU Commission research and policy DGs, and some were co-funded, others were expected to top up limited budgets from their own resources. Despite attempts to harmonise funding schemes, national and international project funders continue to have their own priorities, requirements and expectations when drawing up calls for proposals, selecting and financing research programmes and awards. And except for the European Research Council Award, all the projects featured in the guide were submitted following calls for proposals to work on topics identified by funders and using prescribed methodologies, in some cases disciplinary mixes, stipulating the timeframes, distribution of resources between budget heads and deliverables within a budget, covering impacts, knowledge exchange, infrastructure, and publications. A core feature of the Elgar Guide is its emphasis on lessons learned. The case study authors are invited to reflect with their team members on both the positive and negative lessons that they'd gleaned from their experience participating in the research projects they described in their chapters. And these lessons are reported at the ends of the case study chapters and in the video clips. When read in conjunction with the hot tips in the International Comparative Research Web Companion, many recurring lessons emerge. Firstly, consider engaging a professional administrator to support the project coordinator and know how to delegate tasks. Avoid being overly ambitious, ensure feasibility while catering for contingencies throughout the process. Manage the priorities and expectations of team members, personal and institutional, and stakeholders, funders and end users. Select team members with complementary cultural and disciplinary interests, personal skills and characteristics. Discuss and reach a common understanding of cultural and disciplinary concepts, conventions, methods, dissemination, and publication strategies, and fully integrate less experienced researchers by providing dedicated training. And my final takeaway, the importance not only of adopting an integrated multinational intradisciplinary approach to research, but also of demonstrating economic, social, cultural, and policy impacts from government-funded programs require innovative forms of cooperation. And the future achievements of researchers in the international arena, especially in the social sciences and humanities, depend not only on this proven capacity to work cross-nationally, but also on their ability, irrespective of their own disciplines, to collaborate effectively with researchers in other disciplines to promote international methodological learning and knowledge exchange. All the references to the sites which I've mentioned are available on this slide, and further information, please contact myself or Dave Filipović-Carter.
Super. Thanks for that presentation, Linda. And just so that people are clear, that was obviously a presentation that Linda had pre-recorded, but Linda is obviously here live now to look at the questions. I've just seen a comment come into the chat box about the slides. So the slides will be available after the session. So people will have access to those with all of the links in them. So I agree, Christine, there's a lot of links in there. So Linda, we have had one question come into the chat box. I've also got a couple of questions that have come in previously as well. So the questions in the chat box, first of all, is that some of these projects were for very large amounts of money. So are there any special problems or issues regarding those sorts of very expensive projects, Linda?
Okay. Well, as you'd see from that table with all the project amounts, there was one project in particular which started off from a very low base. It's the LCEDN project. And over the years, by going to multiple funders, they managed to raise millions, literally. And they had a team which engaged in a number of sub-projects for different funders, different suppliers, different audiences. And so it's a very complex project, but it's an ideal project for looking at interdisciplinarity and really fundamentally what is involved in interdisciplinary research. And I have to congratulate the project, or the leader of the teams, multiple teams, which it happened over a period, I think, of 10 years. And certainly it was extremely complex and did require very, very skilled and elaborate collaborations. And interestingly, for those who are RSA members, he is a geographer. And I think geography is one of those disciplines by excellence where you learn, and it's in your DNA, to work across different disciplines. And I think it's thanks to him and some of his close team members that it was really successful, but it was very, very complex.
Super, thank you, Linda. And actually, I think this is quite a related question that's come up as well, because they're thinking about the scale of the projects. So should project coordinators actually employ professional research managers?
Well, should is a good way of putting it. There are two, well, one example where it was a professional manager, research manager, And I'd refer you to the ProRes project and to the video clips, because the research coordinator turned to this professional manager who was from astrophysics, although the project was very much multidisciplinary. And the video clip tells you exactly why it is good to have somebody looking after those aspects of the project. The BSET project is also interesting. It was on capacity building and was driven by research administrators, and definitely involved the knowledge about managing research projects. And then the presenter of the EPIC, it's quite interesting to look at the way that people work out their acronyms. Some of them you can pronounce and say, and others are relevant. But the EPIC project, the video clip there, not by the coordinator, but one of the major participants, talks about the way in which, had they had a professional administrator, the life of the coordinator would have been much easier, and there'd be much fewer burdens on that person. And that is very clear, as I say, in the ProRes clip and that project.
Super, thank you, Linda. There's some more questions coming in the chat box. There's also been a question, in the Q&A box. There is one in the chat box as well. I'll try and come across all of them.
Yeah.
So Natalie, first of all, no question is a silly question, but Natalie is asking a slightly earlier stage question about how we go about finding international collaborators. Is that something we cover in the book?
It's covered in all the sections on team building, how you select the countries that you want to have in your project, how you select the individuals who you're going to be working with. And if you look at, I think I made clear in the presentation, but we've tried very hard in editing this collection to make it so that you could read across the different contributions. And if you look at the project sections of the projects which are about team building, then we asked the authors to talk about the way in which they had selected the countries concerned and selected the participants. And I'm just in a summary because there are lots of answers to these questions. An important factor is obviously the amount of funding you've got, to know how many countries you can extend it to, the countries which you know about, and you need to have people with intimate knowledge. And one of the factors in selecting team members is to select people who have experience of and have international multidisciplinary mindsets, who obviously are going to understand what the issues are that are involved, how to deal with them. But the selection, I think you'll find, is normally because you've been involved in networking activities. You've got to know people, you know whom you can work with, you know which people have got those skills and competences. But also, and a very important factor, I think, for people in mid-career thinking of working and doing this type of work, you need, I think it's very, very helpful when you're able to be involved in projects which are colleagues, possibly in your same institution or in the various networks that you're part of, and that you are able, and one case in particular I think was interesting in that respect, the Tropico case study, where the research assistants, who are often research fellows, were able to lead on sub-projects, so that they have experience working within a bigger team, but also of knowing what the queries were, how you dealt with them, etc. So I think the selection of team members is really, really important, and you've got to build a good relationship with them across the teams. The FFP project is very interesting in that respect as well. It's a very small team, but they devoted an enormous amount of time getting together, brainstorming. There were people who were known to the project coordinator in advance. So those are the sorts of things I think you have to focus on.
Absolutely. And I think, Linda, you've implicitly answered one of the other questions in that answer. So we had a question here about, have we come across projects that have failed, for example, due to partner institutions not being able to agree on legal financial matters, that sort of thing. But I think actually what you're highlighting there, one of the key issues where these things don't work is where we're trying to collaborate with the wrong people, or rather we haven't got the fit right, or we haven't got that shared understanding of what the problem is or what the challenge is we're addressing.
Absolutely. And I think that was another really big project where I'm not going to say that projects failed. I'm going to say that they had to overcome certain difficulties. But just back to the FFP project, because that's an interesting one in some respects, because they started off with a team that they thought was going to work, but they involved somebody whom they didn't really know particularly well. And it turned out quite soon after starting the project that that was not a good fit. And they had to go back to the funders and renegotiate the contract, and that all caused delays, etc. So the project didn't fail because they managed to overcome the difficulties. And I think there are other examples of that when you read across the projects. You might well ask, why did I select the projects for inclusion in the case studies? And that was partly because people I knew worked on interesting projects that we'd worked with in the past, those who were involved in one of the projects that I coordinated and has gone on now to become a leading figure in the field and is coordinating projects and is bringing in other people, and it's training on the job, which I think is really important, and communication, networking skills, and all those soft skills, which are really important, and perhaps even more so than in a single discipline project, because you've got to get a mutual understanding across of concepts. And the bias project is a good one in that respect, because the actual title, bias, what is bias? And depending upon which discipline you come from, you've got to sort that out. There's certainly, I mean, you talk about failing, but there are also issues about the personal circumstances of people working in your project. And often people have to drop out for personal reasons. What do you do about that? How do you replace them? So the responsibility of the coordinator is enormous. And that's why, again, coming back to the earlier question, it's good to have somebody there who's dealing with all of that and sorting out those sorts of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple of questions I want to sort of take together here because they overlap. So we've got a question about the focus, and particularly on the number of challenges in the global south, and about whether we need more research focusing on those sorts of problems. There's also an issue about the fact that we know that there's need for international interdisciplinary research funding, but whether the funders actually genuinely reflect that and support that. And certainly Sally's comment here is suggesting that earlier, not so long ago, that maybe wasn't the case. So again, are the funders really supporting that? And this all ties in with a question from Maggie, which is about how do we reconcile requirements of funders, of our institutions, and of our personal career plans? So I hope you don't mind.
I see that we've not got many minutes left, so I'll try and be rapid.
Actually, Linda, just before you answer, let me just clarify that. We are due to finish in a couple of minutes. I understand people have got tight timelines. I think we'll overrun by 5 minutes, so we'll stop at 25:02. If you can't stay to the end, this is recorded and the recording will be available.
Thanks.
Sorry, Linda.
Okay, well, I'll try and be brief. The Global South, again, there are projects there which very much focus on the Global South, and the LCEDN strongly recommend go and look at that and the issues involved with that. And the sources of funding there are important, obviously, because that was a DFID. A lot of it was funded by DFID, where there are cuts in budgets at the moment, so that is an issue. The funders' support. I mean, what's happening now, and what you'll see when you read across about the funders' requirements, actually it's written into the funders' call, the tender, that you've got to have an interdisciplinary focus. I could go on for a long time about that, which I'm not going to do, but interdisciplinary, it has lots of meanings for different people, and what does it involve? And again, I take you back to the LCEDN project, where I think they really do understand what interdisciplinary is about. And then, what was the last one? Can you just...
It was just so whether funders are really supporting this and how we
they're actually requiring it. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I actually wrote this book, is to because increasingly government funders, the European Union or Horizon programs, they do want, and UKRI in the case of UK researchers, they are requiring interdisciplinary research and multidisciplinary research, and that's where I think particularly social sciences have got to be in there, making contributing to projects, not just as an add-on, but through and through the entirely integrated into the process.
Absolutely. And on that point, Linda, so Christine was asking, could you clarify your definitions of multi, inter, and transdisciplinary in this context?
Not 2 minutes.
I'll say briefly.
But what I would do is ask you to look at specific projects where they do discuss this, where they try and work through it, what the difference is. But my main point would be it's integration. It's not parallel studies. And I do mention that in the slides, that transdisciplinary, okay, you've got transnational as well. So you work across nations, etc. But it's being able to understand where people are coming from, what the contexts are, and what the terms and the concepts are that you're using. And that is absolutely central, critical.
And I think that's just to emphasize that again, that is the sort of topic that is discussed across the case studies, which
absolutely.
I think is,
absolutely.
you know.
And if you look at the index to the book, I mean, I've tried really hard to give you references directly to the places in the book where these things are talked about.
And one of the things we've tried to do both in the book, Linda tried to do in the book, well. And also in the web companion you talked about previously, is try to make these things easily searchable. So as Linda said, there's a narrative of each case study, but you should be able to read across them to answer themes like this. So that's been one of the aims of these resources, to try and do this.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to make the next one the last question, just on time. So is one of the problems of looking for collaborators who know each other already, and again, there's the value in that, does that then work against attempts to encourage new people to the field and to take a risk with new groups?
I don't think so, but I think what I don't much like is the companies now which have got into the market and are saying we can find you partners to work with. I don't think that is an easy way to go about it. But these teams are not small quite often, so you can afford to have people who are at early stages in their careers and on the learning curve. And as I mentioned, I mean, some of the projects illustrate that extremely well. And I'd also just say that several of the project authors and contributors have gone on to greater things. So, you can find all their, if you look at the names, you can find all their emails on the web, but we can also help you in putting you in touch with people if you want to contact us.
Yeah. Super. Thank you, Linda. And I'm very aware there are questions there that we haven't had time to answer, but as I say, time is really pushing against us. So if we haven't been able to answer your questions today, you can contact us at the email addresses that we put up on the last slide. And like Nikki's been saying in the chat box, the slides will be sent out to you and the recording will be available both on the RSA Lounge and on the Elgar Companion website. Further, we can organise bespoke workshops on any of the topics we've mentioned today, either online or in person. So please do feel free, if you want to contact us and follow up more, please do. We'll be very grateful too. Obviously, we would just like to say thank you to the RSA team, especially to Alex and Nikki for organising this webinar, and of course for all of you for attending. Just to note as well, the RSA's next webinar is coming up on the 1st of November, and that's at 1 p.m. UK time. And in that one, Andrew Kelly and Sarah Bird will be discussing the ins and outs of open access. So I think another one of those very hot topics. Further sessions in the webinar series will soon be announced. They'll all be announced on the RSA website. The website also contains more information on membership of the RSA, and that membership works both by considering career stage and geography. So it's definitely personalised. So it's definitely worth taking a look at that. So again, I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of you for coming along today. I hope it's been of use to you. And just from myself and from Linda and from the RSA team, we'll just say goodbye now. Thanks ever so much.